Stop recording.
Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be going over how to use the vatsim network as tutorial 5 in my flight simulator tutorial series. This is a hotly anticipated tutorial. So before we begin, let me just say a few things. Firstly, I know people may have wanted a live flight on vatsim, but to be honest with you, I really cannot be bothered to do one because I've tried, controllers have logged off just because they've decided they've had enough of controlling, so they just go. So I want to do a full flight video on vatsim which is live, where there will be full control. There will be controllers on pretty much all the stations at the airports, because then I can show you how to do it properly. Okay, but I haven't found that yet, so that video will be coming up, but as soon as I find a good flight to do where there's a lot of control. Okay, you will have this often on vatsim where you fly into an airport or out of an airport and you will find there is no control on at all, and that's something I'm going to be covering in this video. Okay, so this is going to be a video just me explaining how to use vatsim, how to use the software, how to file a flight plan with vatsim, okay, and then the sort of things to expect once you call up the controllers, and how to interact with the controllers best, the sort of things you're going to need to say because we're using FSX Pilot to fly. Okay, so it's those sorts of things that I want to talk about, not actually a live vatsim flight. As I say, hopefully will be coming up, but we'll see. The second thing, please do not jump into vatsim as a beginner. Okay, even vatsim as a free network will crucify you if you have no idea what you're doing. If you log on and you cannot speak to controllers properly at all, they're not going to be happy with you, and there is a good chance they will kick you from the network. Okay, even worse with Pilot Edge. Pilot Edge is a paid network, and they will kick you as well. So you know, they're even more professional than vatsim. So if you do not know how to act on Pilot Edge, then you're going to have real issues. Okay, so don't go on there unless you know what you're doing. Okay, and by what I mean by that is, I don't mean you have to know every single thing about how to speak to ATC. You have to know all the terminology. I just mean know basically the structure of what you're going to need to say. Okay, so I would recommend using other ATC add-ons first to get to grips with the terminology that's used. So use default ATC if you would like, use PF3 if you would like, use whatever it is you want, but get to grips with the terminology. Okay, default ATC and PF3 add-ons like that do not use the exact real world terminology. There are some things missing, for example SIDS and stars and a few things, but they do use pretty accurate terminology, and it will give you a really good idea of the structure that will be needed on vatsim. Okay, it's really good to have an idea of the sort of thing to say and the sort of thing to expect, because once you're on vatsim, the controllers will only be so accommodating. They are usually okay. You can usually get them to repeat stuff or to help you out, but if you are struggling, then there is only so much they can do. Right, so let's actually get on to how to use vatsim, shall we? So we're currently in the simulator down on the ground at East Midlands Airport, my home airport in the UK. But where we are doesn't really matter today. The only reason I've loaded up the sim is because you have to be loaded up in the simulator to connect to the vatsim network. So we're not doing any flying, we're not even touching the aircraft, it doesn't matter. I just have to have us loaded in. So we're at the ground, we're on the ground rather, at East Midlands, ready to file a flight plan with vatsim and to connect. So there are two bits of software you will need to connect to the vatsim network if you're using FSX or P3D. The first is VPilot. VPilot is the client that will connect to the vatsim network for you. It's the client you use to speak to controllers, to view messages on frequency, all that kind of stuff. Okay. The second piece of software you don't need, but I find it very helpful, is called vatspy. Okay, vatspy, and this will allow you to view all the controllers currently on the vatsim network, to see their frequency, their name, and the most important thing I find here is the frequency. So you can log on at an airport and you can go onto this vatspy and you can look who is on at that airport, whether they have an Atis, whether they have a ground, whatever, and you can look at the frequencies and see what that is if you don't have it memorized, and then you can easily input that into the VPilot client, which I'll demonstrate later. The only other thing that vatspy shows you is the controller's rating. Okay, so just a little note here. I've often found the higher the controller's rating is, the less accommodating they will be. Okay, unfortunately, the higher the controller's rating, the more professional they think they are. They like to think of themselves as real-world air traffic controllers. So when they see blind pilots coming through, they're not too happy about it. Usually, you'll be alright as long as you can follow their instructions. Okay, if you're with a lower rated controller, and it will say S1 if they're a lower rated, which means student 1, and you can have a student 2, a student 3, etc., and it goes up. You have various ratings that you can get. If you're with a lower rated controller and you make a mistake, they will usually help you get back on track. If you're with a higher rated controller who's operating in busy airspace, they won't be so friendly. You have to do as they ask, make sure you're doing it right, otherwise they will just get annoyed at you and that you will encounter issues. Okay, this is why I say know what you're doing, know your aircraft, know how to use FSX Pilot and all this stuff before you come on. So that's vatspy covered. That's what it shows you. You can see who's on, their frequency, and their rating and stuff. I'll demonstrate vatspy in a minute. It's very easy. It's just like a grid. But first we're going to go to VPilot, which is the client that I was talking about. Right, VPilot. There we go. So the first button you land on is Connect. Now, a side note about all the buttons in VPilot, there is a workaround for this, but they are not very accessible. So if you would like to click on a button in VPilot, you have to do the move cursor to mouse point, I think it's called, I can't remember exactly. The command that you do on the button is Shift, then your NVDA modifier key and M. So for me, I press Shift, caps lock and M, and it moves to that button that says Connect, or any other button that I'm on. Okay, because you cannot just press Enter. If I press Enter on the Connect button, as you can see, absolutely nothing happens at all. We're not connected at all. So you have to do the Shift NVDA modifier M to move the mouse point to that button, and then you have to use a mouse, and some people I found it's right click, some people I found it's left click. Okay, so you may need to do a little bit of experimenting. For me it's right click. So you do, let me just quickly, I'll demonstrate in a minute on the settings button because that's easier. We don't need to connect at the moment. But so you need a mouse, you do the Shift NVDA modifier M, then you use the mouse. Sometimes you have to press right click, sometimes you have to press left click. Press it a few times and it will press on that button, it will click the button. Okay, make sure your mouse is, preferably you're holding the mouse in your hand and not on a table, otherwise it could slip and click another button. Okay, once you actually connect and stuff, you won't need this mouse. It's just to actually get you connected that's the actual issue. So that's the first button, Connect. The next button is Mode Charlie. This is a type of transponder mode Charlie, and it just means that once you're in the air you should always be squawking Mode Charlie so that controllers can see your altitude on their radar display. So there is a setting in the settings panel where you can set it to automatically squawk Mode Charlie as soon as you are airborne. I strongly recommend you tick that setting, which I'll show you in a minute, because this Mode Charlie button is one of them where you have to do the Shift NVDA modifier M and then left click or right click and to actually get it pressed, and there's no indication of whether you've actually pressed it or not, so it can be a bit of a pain. And the last thing you want is controllers keep saying, why aren't you squawking Mode Charlie? So I recommend have it do it automatically. Ident. The next button in the panel is Ident. This is another transponder mode, so you may hear controllers tell other aircraft to squawk Ident.
Flight plan.
Flight plan, this is where we'll go soon to file our flight plan onto the VATSIM network servers. Just a side note as well, if you're using a website like SimBrief to actually plan your flight, you will notice that you may have an option to export it as a VATSIM flight plan file format, and then you can come in here and actually import it into the client, so that you don't have to type everything in manually, because this way when you go into flight plan you have to type in your cruising altitude, all the waypoints in your route. So if you are using SimBrief, that makes it easier, but it all depends. If you're just doing a short GA flight, you may just want to use online flight planner, in which case you'll just have to type some information into this flight plan button here, which I'll show you.
Settings.
This is settings, so we're going to go in here. This could be quite important,
Settings.
so let's have a look. So I've done the Shift NVDA modifier M, so let me just try right click here on the mouse.
Preview level 0 network 1 of 9.
And perfect, it worked. So hopefully it should be right click for you. If not, have a go with left click. I have had a few mouses over the time that I've used VatSim, and most were right, but I did have one that was left. Okay, so we've got a tree view here. This part's pretty accessible. Network. Right, this is where you would come in to put your VatSim ID. You heard it says VatSim ID, and you've also got your VatSim password right there. I'm just going to make sure it doesn't read mine out. But so you would come in here when you first get VPilot set up to put in your VatSim details once you have made an account with VatSim.
OK button. Cancel. Preview network 1 of 9. Notifications 2 of 9 level 0.
Notifications. This doesn't really mean a lot to us. There's not a lot in here that we need. There's one thing that I would recommend just having a quick look at. Let me show you.
OK but flash taskbar icon for new private message.
Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that.
Show incoming text messages in simulator. Check
No.
Sound buzzer for PTT while not on voice. Check box checked.
That's the one. Sound buzzer for PTT whilst not on voice. I would recommend having this checked. All this means that if you try and press your push to talk key, which you also have to set up later, if you try and press that on a non-voice frequency, it will just give you a little buzz to let you know that you cannot speak on that frequency. Okay, the reason the frequency would be non-voice is, for example, the Unicom frequency, which is 122.8, which you'll be on if there's no control for your current airspace. That frequency is non-voice, it's only text, otherwise it would just go mad with pilots talking on it, okay, because there's no control. So that one, if you press push to talk, it will just give you a little buzz so you know this frequency is non-voice. I recommend having that checked, it can be helpful, okay?
Oh, cancel. Preview notification. Fonts 3 of 9 level 0.
Fonts we're not even going to bother with.
Audio 4 of 9 level 0.
Okay, the next tab is audio. So there's a few things in here we might want to configure to make sure our audio is all set up.
OK but microphone device. Combo box direct sound microphone. Connection smart audio HD collapsed.
So you can see we've got microphone device. It's currently set on direct sound, microphone HD, whatever. Okay, there are two types of sound you can have on VatSim at the moment. There's direct sound and wave sound. They are both just different types of sound for your voice to be transmitted and for you to receive the controller's audio. So you'll see in the next one, it's on direct sound speakers. Okay, so with the microphone, if I go up, I've got exactly the same microphone, but it says wave. Then we've got
direct sound microphone, connected smart audio HD.
Exactly the same microphone, but it says direct. Okay, I recommend. It's very difficult to know what to recommend because it can depend on a lot of things, including things like your internet speed. The direct sound one is clearer for you, so you can hear the controller more clearly, and that can be important because the VatSim audio codec is bad, very, very bad. Probably even worse than a real aircraft radio. And yes, so I'd recommend having direct sound. But the problem with direct sound is, although it's clearer, it can break up a little bit sometimes because it's clearer. It can break up, it can kind of distort a little bit, it can kind of cut out. And that can also depend on your internet speed. So the other one is wave. Wave is less clear, so it sounds a bit more muffled, but it's always kind of more constant. It doesn't really cut out, you can always hear the controller, it's just more muffled. I personally like direct
sound microphone, connected smart audio HD.
But that's personal choice.
Output device, combo box direct sound speakers, connected smart audio HD collapsed.
Yeah, and this is the output, so you want them both set on the same thing really, I would recommend. So that's on direct sound as well. You could have that on wave as well. So we'll leave that on direct.
Enable VHF simulation for audio output, checkbox not checked.
This is to enable VHF audio simulation for output, which is like a VHF radio when you hear the controller talking. As I said earlier, the vatsim audio codec is bad as it is. I would personally not recommend having this checked, otherwise the controller will sound even worse. All this actually does to the audio is remove some of the bass from it, so it sounds more tinny and apparently more like a VHF radio, very high frequency radio, but in my opinion it just makes it even worse, so I wouldn't bother with this.
Volume slider 50.
That's just volume.
Preview audio 4 of 9 level 0.
And we're back to the tree view.
Push to talk. PTT 5 of 9 level 0.
Push to talk. This is very self-explanatory, but I'll just show you.
Cancel button. Apply button. OK button. Set new PTT key or button.
So that's just set new PTT or key. You just go in there and then you would just type the key that you want to be your new push to talk key. Mine is delete. I would recommend not having a key that you use for other applications. You don't want to be pressing it whilst you're using other applications.
Apply. Cancel button. Preview. Preview. Push to talk. Model matching.
Right.
Left 6 of 9 level 0.
Model matching. Now there's not really a lot in here I need to show you. I just want to quickly explain how vatsim does model matching. What model matching is how aircraft show up on your screen. So if someone logs in a Airbus A320, how will they show up on your screen in the flight simulator as an Airbus A320? Okay, so if you have no model matching applications installed, what vatsim does is it pulls all the models from your flight simulator that you have installed, all the aircraft that you have installed, okay, and it uses them to put other aircraft into the simulator. So if you have an Airbus A320 installed into P3D, for example, and someone logs on to vatsim in an Airbus A320, vatsim will use the one you have installed, the model that you have installed, to show that other person. Okay, you can pretty much just leave this alone. I really don't find it that necessary. If you don't have the model that someone has logged on in, then it will just show up as a default. I think it's a CRJ they usually show up as, okay, as a default, like little jet, if you don't have the model. There are applications you can get. One is called FLAI. This adds loads more aircraft models to the vatsim on your computer, so that you know pretty much every aircraft that logs on to vatsim will be shown correctly in your simulator. If you would like to get FLAI, then you can. If not, then it probably won't make much of a difference at all, unless you are streaming, for example, just so that everyone can see the correct aircraft that have logged on around you.
Preview. Performance 7 of 9 level 0.
Performance, this could be quite helpful if you're finding when you log on to the network that you have your computer's really struggling and your computer's not that powerful. You may want to come in here. Let me just show
Cancel.
you.
Apply button.
All these are just set to default at the moment because mine's absolutely fine with vatsim network.
OK button. Do not display aircraft beyond combo box. Edit 40.
So this is just saying do not display aircraft beyond 40, so it will only display 40 aircraft at a time.
Maximum aircraft to display combo box. Edit 999.
That's just saying it can only show 999 aircraft at a time. I doubt that will ever happen.
Performance 7 of 9 level 0.
And that's pretty much it. You could turn those down to very small numbers if you were really struggling with the vatsim network on your computer.
Updates 8 of 9 level 0.
Updates, we don't really need to look in here. It just says that it will check for updates automatically, although they never seem to release any updates.
Miscellaneous 9 of 9 level 0.
Right, miscellaneous, there's quite a bit of important stuff in here. Let me just go and show you.
Apply. OK button. Automatically squawk mode C on takeoff checkbox check.
So that is important. Automatically squawk mode Charlie on takeoff is checked. I would, as I said, recommend to have this checked, so that controllers can see your altitude as soon as you lift off the ground. That's what mode Charlie is. It means they can see that your aircraft's altitude on their radar. So have this checked and it will automatically do it for you as soon as you lift off. You won't have to mess about pressing buttons.
Keep window visible checkbox checked.
Doesn't really make a difference to us.
Preview miscellaneous 9 of 9 level 0.
And that's it. Okay, remember to hit
Cancel
apply.
Apply button.
Okay, let's escape because
Confirm.
I didn't
button,
actually.
yes, but
Yeah,
space press.
I didn't change
Control.
anything that's important to me. I just kept my settings as they were, so we can get rid of it. Right. Now we're going to look at the flight plan. So let's say I have created a flight plan. Okay. From this airport, EGNX, East Midlands in the UK, to another airport, which I probably have one that I can find. So I've created it with Online Flight Planner or SimBrief. I have put it into FSX Pilot and created it. So everything's good there. And a note for if you're on VATSIM, you do not have to do the flight plan thing and then load it into the simulator itself, where you go into load in the sim. You don't have to do that. There's no need. The only reason you do that is if you're using default ATC. So we filed it with FSX Pilot. That's all sorted. What do we do now so that the VATSIM network controllers know where we're going? Well, you have to go here
Connect. Mode C. Ident. Flight plan.
to flight plan and make sure this is all set correctly. So let's do the
Flight
old
plan.
trick with the mouse. Let's do that. Then we'll just do a, there we go, right click,
Flight type. Combo box IFR collapsed.
and perfect, it's brought up the flight plan window. So let me go into my
Menu.
FSX
X,
Pilot
unknown.
flight plans here
Everything. Edit. Blank. F. S. X.
and actually
FSX type. Unknown. Still
find
FSX
a flight
2,
plan that
program
we've
five.
created
FSX
before.
F. Items view list. Flight list. Items view list. Taxi. E. EBB.
Let's keep going down. I want from EGNX.
EDDM lip. EGGD. EGGP. EGLLK. EGNX. EGNX. EGCC 37. EGNX LGZA 3855. EKCHED.
Right.
EGNX. EGCC.
That's all we've got. So we've got one going to Manchester and one to some other far-flung place, LGZA, which is in Greece. Okay, let's go to Manchester. So if we open this up,
EGNX. EGCC notepad. Text.
okay, so let's say we want to file a flight plan on VATSIM to head off to Manchester. Okay, let's see how we do that.
Flight
So
control
I'm just going to close the flight plans folder.
Still everything.
Close
EGNX.
that.
EGCC notepad.
All I
Text.
need is the flight plan up in Notepad, and the reason I need it up in Notepad is because I'm going to be looking at the waypoints in the flight plan and typing them into VATSIM's flight plan section.
VPilot row 1 column file flight plan current time 1001.
Right.
Flight type combo box IFR collapsed.
So it says the first thing is flight type. We are IFR.
Departure airport edit selected EGCC.
So that's departure airport. All this is saved from the last time I created a flight plan with VATSIM. So you can see the departure airport is set on Echo Golf Charlie Charlie, which is Manchester, which is actually where we're heading today. But it's not our departure. That was from last time. So we're going to type in.
E selection removed. G N X.
So that has
Departure
changed.
airport edit EGNX. Destination airport edit selected EGPH.
That's on EGPH from the last time I did a flight plan. We don't want that. We want EGCC.
Alternate airport edit selected EGPF.
This is the alternate airport. Now, some websites that are more complex, like SimBrief, again, will give you alternate airports to go to, which you can input in here. If you have used onlineflightplanner.org because you just find it easier, or because it's a shorter flight and you can't be bothered to use SimBrief with all its complexities, then, well, you can make it up. Basically, you can, if you know an airport that is close to the destination one that you've selected, you can put it in here. So I know that, I don't know, let's think. So Manchester EGCC is in the UK. Let's say I want an alternate airport. We can put pretty much anything in here. I doubt we're going to need an alternate, but let's go for EGBB.
E selection G D D.
That's Birmingham Airport in the UK. It's relatively close to Manchester. You know, it's not ridiculously far in flying distance, and they usually have control on there every so often, so we'll put that in. So we've now set that up. So we've got departure airport is EGNX, which is correct.
Destination airport edit EGCC.
Correct.
Alternate airport edit EGBB.
Correct.
Departure time edit selected 11:15.
So this is departure time, and this is in Zulu time, okay? So you need to know what the current Zulu time is. This is again set from the last time. It says 11:15. What is the time in the UK? I tell you what, Alexa, what's the time in the UK?
The time in the United Kingdom is 12:13 p.m.
Okay, right. So it's 12:13 p.m. Good. So that means we're going to be 11 something for departure because it's in Zulu time, which is behind. So I would say if we were going to actually do this flight, which we're not, but if we were, by the time we'd called up control and everything, we would probably be out by about 11:45.
Departure time edit selected 11:15.
So let's get rid of that and put 11. Oops. Sorry, 11 colon 4 5. That'll do.
Time en route edit selected 35.
This is the time and route. Again, if you use a website like SimBrief, I think it will give you a time and route calculation. And you can also use Online Flight Planner to give you a time en route as well, because it will also show you how much fuel you've got on board and how long the flight should be. Okay, I haven't actually got that up at the moment, so I'm just going to estimate that this flight, because we're in a Cessna, let's say will be about, we'll leave it on 35 minutes. Okay, this is not you know, it doesn't have to be entirely accurate, is what I'm saying. So where it says like time en route and stuff, if you put 40 minutes and it turns out it's an hour, it makes no difference at all. It's just controllers may refer to this if they just want to check how long you've scheduled the flight to be, but it really doesn't matter. You can estimate this if you don't know, okay?
Departure, time en route, edit, selected 35.
That's 35 minutes.
HH edit, selected 0.
Hours there is set to 0. So we've got 35 minutes and 0 hours for our route time.
Fuel available, edit, selected 0.
So this is fuel available.
HH edit, selected 2.
So we've got 0
Fuel available, edit,
minutes
selected 0. HH edit, selected 2.
and 2 hours. We'll leave it on that. That's probably about what we've actually got. This is set from last time again, but that'll do. So again, if you use Online Flight Planner or SimBrief, it will show you how much fuel on board you've got, which you can input in there. Doesn't have to be exact, as I say. It's just something controllers may refer to.
Cruise speed, combo box, edit, 280.
Cruise speed you're going to want to set here. This is in knots. We're in the Cessna 172. If we were actually doing this flight, we'll say we would be. So we wouldn't be at 280 knots. Let's bring this back.
0. 20.
Let's go with about.
110.
Let's aim for
120.
120 knots. I doubt we'd get that in this Cessna at the altitude we'd be going up to, but we'll leave it at 120 knots. Okay. So. Again, doesn't have to be exactly on. If you set, you know, to be 280 knots and you're cruising at 300, there's not going to be a big issue at all.
Cruise altitude, combo box, edit, 12,000.
This does need to be spot on though. So your cruise altitude, this is your final cruising altitude. If you're in an airliner, for example, you'll usually be given an initial climb during your clearance, but I'll talk more about that later. We're in a small general aviation aircraft, so
11,000.
we're just going to be cruising at, let's say,
0.
3,500 feet.
2,000, 25, 3,000, 3,500.
That'll do, because it's a very short flight.
Heavy aircraft checkbox not checked.
We're obviously not heavy. That would be checked if you were, so that you would know to put heavy on the end of your call sign. So you could say Speedbird 123 heavy.
Equipment suffix, combo box collapsed.
Equipment suffix, if you know the equipment suffix, you can put this in here and things like that. Let's just put C172.
C172.
That will do there, because we're in a Cessna.
Route edit multi.
Okay, this is the route box where you can type all stuff in to do with your route, so the controllers know exactly what your flight plan will be. I'm just going to select all and get rid of a load of stuff out of there that was in there from my last flight, because obviously we don't need to see that. And what we're going to do is type in our route from East Midlands EGNX to Manchester EGCC using
EGNX EGCC notepad row 1 EGNX EGCC notepad text editor multi-line /
this text file from FSX Pilot. Now I know this flight plan is going to be very simple. I think there's literally one waypoint in it, but I'll show you how you would do it. So let's keep going down.
Set origin EGN, set destination, set speed, set discount, set user, waypoint 0.0120.0 TNT 50.
So our first waypoint is TNT. We have to sometimes check the spelling, so you can go across.
TNT, space.
Perfect. So in the route box, I'm going to start off by putting EGNX, comma,
space.
Then I'm going to put TNT,
TNT,
comma,
space.
And just check,
0.0120.0 EGCC 50.
and it goes direct to EGCC. So I'm going to put EGCC, full stop. Okay, that is how you would type a flight plan in its very simplest form. You've got
EGNX, TNT, EGCC.
EGNX, TNT, EGCC. Usually you would have far more waypoints between the two airports, which you would just list with commas in between. And of course, if you had airways as well, you could easily list them just by typing the airway and then to what waypoint you would be going to take that airway to. Okay, but that is how you would do a very basic flight plan. So that flight plan is just saying we're going from EGNX direct to TNT waypoint, Trent waypoint that is, then direct to EGCC airport. Okay, very simple.
Remarks, edit multi-line, selected I'm totally blind. I am using a program to fly the plane. I cannot taxi and will need permission to spawn on the runway whenever it is practical. May need some help flying SID/stars. Please understand there may be some mistakes, but with a little help everything should be fine. Okay, these are my flight remarks. I usually leave these the same for every flight plan. These are quite important because you need to tell the controller in here you're using FSX Pilot. Okay, it doesn't matter whether they know what that is or not really. You just need to tell them what its limitations are. So you may struggle to fly restrictions on SIDs and stars, for example altitude and speed restrictions, and you will struggle to taxi, so you will need to spawn. Things like that you need to put in there. This is helpful because if you get a controller who is
not understanding, for example, why you need to spawn, instead of having a massive long conversation with them telling them exactly why you need to spawn to the runway or why you're going to need some help, you can just say, just refer to my flight remarks in the flight plan, please, and they should be able to look at these and go, oh yeah, okay, fine. They should. That's what these are here for, and any other flight plan remarks you need to put in there.
Send plus receive radio button checked.
This is if you want to send plus receive radio, which obviously we do.
File flight plan button.
You can also select to do text there, because you can just do text on vatsim, although I wouldn't recommend it. File flight plan, well, we can do that pretty much, although we're not actually connected at the moment because I haven't clicked the connect button, so it's going to give me an error, but we'll get it filed.
VPilot.
So you heard it beeped at me. That just means we haven't been able to send it to the server because you weren't connected, but we'll fix that. So let's get rid of that notepad file that we don't need with the waypoints in.
Profile, untitled scene, scenes open rock.
Okay.
VPilot row 1 column 2 controllers and range, tab control, edit, blank.
Right. So let's go back to the buttons.
Connect, mode C, connect.
Where it says connect, and we're going to actually connect to the network. Okay. So right click on
connect
the
button.
thing, and we get a window come up with a connect button.
Cancel button. Recent aircraft. Combo box N80992. God collapsed.
Then we get a list of recent aircraft. Okay, so you can see that's my first one.
D7215. DHAT.
Okay, so it says the aircraft, then it says the type code. So that says November 80992, and it says GAR, which actually means GA. Okay, which just means it's a type general aviation aircraft right there. So if you are using an aircraft you've used before and it's already filled out, you can literally just click on that and it will connect. So if we see this November 80992, you can see the call sign is there. You will have to sort the call sign out yourself, okay? If you're flying an airliner for an airline, you have to know the ICAO code for that airline, okay? So for example, for Speedbird, British Airways, it's BAW. So if you were flying British Airways 123, in that box there you would put BAW 123. Obviously this is a general aviation aircraft, so it's not for an airline, so it's just got a reg there. It says November 80992, okay?
Type code, edit, selected car.
Type code, this is where you would put the type code for your aircraft. It currently says GA. I can change this here and put C172.
Cell code, edit, blank.
Cell code, that's if you're heading out over oceans. You don't really need that unless you are.
Connected shared cockpit mode, observer mode, checkbox not checked.
That's if you're using shared cockpit, which obviously doesn't work for us, so just leave that as it is.
Connect button.
And connect, okay. If you did not have the aircraft registered before, okay, so it was a new aircraft you've never taken on VATSIM before, you would have to come and you would have to add a new aircraft. You would simply do that by just filling it out again, okay? So you would just go and edit stuff. So where it says call sign, type code, all that stuff, you would just edit that, okay, to make sure the aircraft is set up for VATSIM. So there are two bits of important information you need. You need the airline. If you're flying with an airline, you need their ICAO code, not the IATA code. Don't get confused, it's the ICAO code that you need. This is just so that your aircraft will show up properly on VATSIM. So if you're flying a British Airways, it will show up as a British Airways. And then the next important piece of information is your type code. So you can look this up as well. Every aircraft has its own type code. Usually it's pretty easy to work out. So if you're flying a Boeing 737-800, for example, it's just B738, but you may want to check it if you're unsure. Then you just click connect.
Connect button. Space pressed. VPilot. Controllers in range. Disconnect.
You can see it now says disconnect, so we can tell we're connected, okay? Now, what if we want to... So we've done our flight plan. Let's just start here. We've done our flight plan, but we actually need to go and click file on that flight plan again, because you can't file the plan properly until you're actually connected to the network, okay? So my flight plan is all filled in. I just need to click file.
Mode C, Ident, flight plan.
So flight plan. Let's just do the right click.
File flight plan button.
So everything is already set in here, just as we did before with the route, with the start and end airport. But this time if I click file flight plan,
Space pressed. Controllers in range.
You'll hear it didn't beep at me, which means, yep, your flight plan has now been filed, it's on the VATSIM servers, it's ready to use. So when I call up a controller and say, East Midlands Ground November 80992 is type Cessna 172 at stand 10 or gate 10, whatever, requesting clearance to Manchester as filed. They will be able to look and they will be able to see what my routing is, what my aircraft is, all that stuff, and that will be visible to them. Okay.
Disconnect.
That's pretty much all we need to do in this client. Okay. There are two more boxes I want to show you before we can leave the client. So there's the
controllers and range, tab control, edit blank,
edit blank,
edit read only multi-line,
and edit read only. Okay. These two boxes are important. The edit read only one is where you will see messages. Like you can see there, it says flight plan filed. That's automated. If you were on a frequency and there were text pilots talking to text controllers, or the controller was typing in text, you would be able to see that in this read-only box here. Okay. And it's also helpful because you can ask controllers to repeat things in text. If you're struggling to hear what they're saying, you can say, could you put that in text please, and they will type it out in text for you, especially if it's a IFR clearance, for example, because it can be very long, very wordy, and you can forget parts of it. So if they put it in text, it will appear here with a timestamp and the controller's name. So it could say EGNX-GND, which would stand for East Midlands Ground, basically. So they could message me with a clearance, and it would appear here, and that would be visible to all pilots on the frequency, just like we can see here. This edit blank is a box that will perform two functions. So A, you can type things, if you're on a frequency, you can type things to controllers. So if you are a text pilot, you just want to use text, this is the box you would type things in to controllers. Or if you wanted to just send a message to the frequency, so for example, if you were on Unicom and you wanted to send a message to the frequency to let pilots know what you were doing, this is where you would type that message and then you would press enter. Okay, I'll go through that a bit more in detail later. But it also works like a console, just like FSX Pilot does. So you can type in commands here. This is where you can do your radios. Okay. So to change frequency, you would type here .com1, then space, and the frequency. So if I wanted to go to Unicom, which is 122.8, I would type .com1 space 122.8, enter, and it should switch to that frequency. Okay. Sometimes you'll get a little beep from the client as well, just to let you know you've switched frequencies. If we go back to the where we can see the information, it says that it's set to 122.8, which is the Unicom frequency right there. So perfect. There are also other commands that you can use. Okay, one being .msg. This is quite helpful. So just like the .com one, you can also do .msg and then a controller's call sign. Okay, so if you wanted to, let's say East Midlands Ground was on, okay, now, and I needed to message them just to let them know, sorry, that okay, I'm a blind pilot at your airport, I'm going to need permission to spawn to the runway, is that okay with you? If I just want to let them know that, or have a private conversation with them, and I don't want everyone to see it on frequency, I can use this .msg, which will actually send a message to them. So I would do .msg, and then you could do their call sign. So for example, for East Midlands, it would probably be EGNX, and then you would do a line. Oops, sorry.
Line.
There we go. Line. GND. Okay. You could look at their call sign in the VATSPY application, which I'll show in a moment. Okay, so it would be probably EGNX line GND, or it could be TWR if they're a tower, etc. So then you can message them there, type a message to them, space, message, enter, that would go to them. Okay,
space.
And then that would create a new tab.
Edit messages tab selected.
So you have a little set of tabs here before those two edit boxes. The first one is messages tab, and you currently don't have any more. So messages tab is just the main messages tab that's public, that everyone on frequency can see. But if a controller or a supervisor sent you a private message, or if you sent them a private message, then it would appear in a new tab right there. Okay, so if I did send East Midlands Ground a private message, I would have one tab saying
controllers and messages tab selected.
Messages right there. Then if I did right arrow, I would also have another one saying EGNX line GND. Okay, which is my messages tab to East Midlands Ground. Okay, that's what would happen. So that's how you can private message. That's what that edit read only does. It's a list of all the recent messages you've received from either automated or on frequency, and then the edit blank is your console box to type to change frequencies, to send messages, or to send a message to the frequency. For example, if I put in here November 80992 is on ground at East Midlands Airport, and then if I press enter, that would be sent to my current frequency, which is Unicom. Okay, I'm not going to do that because I don't need to send that, so let me just get rid of that, but there we go. Let me just quickly show you VatSpy. So this is an important application because when you first load in at an airport, you need to know what controllers are on, you need to know what controllers are around you, and you need to know their frequencies. So there is a bug, by the way, with VatSpy, where if you have a lot of tabs open, sometimes VatSpy will disappear, so you can't alt tab to it. It's very annoying, and it also doesn't appear in your running applications list. So don't worry if this happens and think, oh my god, it's gone and I can't open it, because even if you go to the desktop, it won't open. There is a workaround. It will appear in your system tray, and you can just enter on it there. Okay, apologies, that is just refreshed. So yes, it will appear in your system tray, so if it disappears, always look in your system tray and it will be there. It will also sometimes chuck you back to the top of the grid, like it just did with me. It said row 0 and chuck me back to the top. Reason being that it's just refreshed. So a controller has logged off or logged on, and it has updated to show that to me, so I can see that they've gone. Okay, so this is a very simple list. Let me show you right at the top what you've got. So it says call sign, and this is the first person who's on. It says BN approach or something. I have no idea what airport that is. Let me go down a bit more to a one that I actually know.
Row 13, row 15, row Kelson, row 15 XTWR selected. Row 6, row 13, row Kelson, row 13 EGPHTWR selected. Row 12, row Kelson, row 12 EGPH Atis. Row 11, row Kelson, row 11 EGL2GND select. Row 9, row Kelson, row 9 EGJJGND selected.
Tell you what, let's go to Heathrow.
Row 10, row Kelson, row 10 EGKKGND selected.
Okay, that's actually Gatwick there, EGKK. You heard what it said?
Row 10, row Kelson, row 10 EGKKGND selected.
So call sign EGKK line GND, which is Gatwick Ground.
Frequency row 10 121.800 selected.
So go to the right, it gives you their frequency, so you can see what frequency they're on.
Name row 10 Ident selected.
That's the name of the controller.
Rating row 10 S1 selected.
You can see he's a student 1 controller.
Facility row 10 GND selected.
Facility is on his ground.
Position row 10 London Gatwick Ground selected.
Position is London Gatwick Ground, of course.
Time online row 10 113 selected.
And he has been online. Apologies, 1 second, everyone. So
time online row 10 113 selected.
He's been online for that amount of time.
Position
so
facility row 10.
That's very easy. It's just a table. Okay, so let me just have a look if there is any on. So we can see there is actually a tower on for EGCC, which we filed as our destination. So we can see his name is Joe Timon. He's on 118.620. He's an S1. So we can see information here. We can see that there's a tower on. So if we were actually doing this flight, there would be a tower at our destination.
CGND selected.
There's also a ground.
Frequency row 7 121.850 selected. Name row 7 Luke Thompson selected. Rating row 7 S1 selected.
Etc.
Row 6 row Kelson row 6 EGCC Atis selected.
There's also an Atis, so that would mean that when we were flying along we might want to get that Atis information, so when we call up tower at our destination airport, we can say we have the information.
Frequency row 6 121.970 selected.
Okay.
Name row 6 Joe Timon selected.
That's the frequency of the Atis.
Row 5 row Kelson row 5 EDDFN selected.
And that's it. We're now into EDDF, which is Germany. So we can see from that there is unfortunately no ATC on at EGNX, which is our starting airport, but there is some ATC on at Manchester. Okay, so
Controllers in range. Tab control.
Let's go back to the VPilot client. Now I've showed you everything in the VPilot client. Let me just give you a few tips. So one other thing I was going to say about private messaging with a controller is if you are struggling to understand a controller's messages because they're like private messages and they're not showing up properly, okay, in this tab, so where we had messages tab,
Read only messages tab selected.
if a new tab appears from a controller messaging you, it may not read it. You can't just tab to
Edit read only multi-line.
edit read only and read the messages there. If that happens and you can't read their messages, try using Object Nav or OCR and you should be able to get them to read, okay? So we've talked about the different types of messages. There's the message you can send directly to the frequency just by typing and pressing enter in the edit box. You can also do .msg to private messenger controller followed by their call sign, which you'll be able to find out from VatSpy. And we've also shown how you can do it like to do .com1 to change the frequency. So a few other tips. Let me just demonstrate what you would need to do. Okay, so if you were doing a flight between two airports that were fully controlled, the first thing you would do is go and get the Atis information for the airport that you were starting at. Okay, so you would find the frequency for the Atis, you would come in here and you'd go .com1, then that frequency, and you would listen to the Atis information. Okay, you just want to take note of some important things, for example the active runway, but you also want to note what the information is. So it could say information alpha or information bravo, and when you know that, you can pretty much switch the Atis off. So then you're going to switch to let's say clearance delivery is on. It could be ground, it could be tower, but let's say clearance delivery is on. You would switch to them and you would say your call sign. You would have to say what stand you are on, so you need to note that when you spawn into the simulator, whether you what stand you're on at the airport. We're on currently stand 10. You need to tell them what type of aircraft you are, and you need to just request clearance to your destination as filed. You need to tell them you've got information alpha or bravo or whatever you heard on the Atis, and you need to tell them the QNH. So you can say, let me just give you a demonstration. So I could say November 80992 East Midlands clearance, good morning, requesting clearance to Manchester as filed. We are a Cessna 172 on stand 10 with information alpha QNH 2992. Whatever, it doesn't matter really what order you say in, you can perfect your order. As long as you get all that information in, you will be good. That's all the information you need to tell the controller. The controller will then respond with a clearance. So he will, it all depends on your type of flight plan. He will probably give you a SID to fly, which you can probably fly with FSX Pilot. He will probably, he will definitely give you a squawk code. He'll give you probably a frequency to go to when you're ready to taxi or something like that if he's a clearance delivery controller. So you need to do your squawk code, of course. So remember that box that's a console box right there. You do .x space then your squawk code. So I could do .x
space
2222. Okay, whatever. That's our squawk code. Enter. And if I go back to the messages box, it says squawk code set to 2222. Perfect. So that is now set by using .x. Okay, so then you will have to read back to the controller your clearance. So you would read everything back to him as he said, and he would say read back correct. Now if he gives you a SID and you do not know the initial altitude of that SID, you can ask him. So just say November 80992, just requesting the initial altitude to climb to on the given SID. And then hopefully he'll give you a SID and he may say I'll climb to 5,000. Okay, do not just climb straight up to your cruise altitude, because that won't be correct on the SID that he gives you. So that's how that will work. Now there is a layered sort of system on VatSim. Okay, it's very rare that you'll see an airport fully staffed where you've got clearance delivery, ground, tower, everything. Okay, approach, all that good stuff. Usually it will just be a few. So for example, if clearance delivery is not on, you contact ground and get your clearance from him, and ground will then sort you out with taxi. If ground is not on, you will contact tower, get your clearance from him, and he will sort you out with taxi. Okay, If you're flying into an airport and there is, say, I don't know, a tower on, but there's no approach controller on, you would contact tower, or he would contact you with a contact me, which I'll talk about in a second, and he would act as like an approach controller, kind of. So there's a layered system, like I say. If one is not on, if say ground is not on, you can't just taxi at your own discretion. You have to contact tower if they're on and let them know, okay, and get your clearance from them. So there's a layered system of what happens if there's no control on. And there is a helpful article on that, I think, on the VATSIM website if you don't understand that. There's a lot of articles on the VATSIM website if you are struggling with the concept, so you can go and look on there. So that's how you would get out of an airport. Then let's say you went to a ground controller, you would just have to let them know you need to taxi by spawning. Sometimes ground will need to contact tower if they're on and let them know and say, hey tower, there's going to be a plane spawning on the active runway, is that okay? Hopefully tower will say yes, as long as they're an accommodating controller, and then you'll be able to spawn to the runway, contact tower. They'll give you takeoff clearance and you can go, and then pretty much you'll be contacting departure if there is one, or you'll be sticking with tower if there isn't a departure. And you'll need to report passing altitude usually. So they might say November 80992, report passing altitude. I would say November 80992, Roger, we are airborne passing 2,000 feet, and then you would just fly the SID as normal, and either once you finish flying the SID or the controller tells you to resume on nav, you can then just go direct to your first waypoint on your flight plan, okay? Just run the flight plan with FSX Pilot. Sometimes controllers may give you a direct, so they may see your flight plan and go, actually, yeah, he doesn't need to fly all those waypoints, we can skip a few of those. So he might say November 80992 cleared direct to such and such a waypoint, and then all that you would have to do is go to your FSX Pilot flight plan menu and just go next waypoint until you hear the waypoint he's just given you direct to. So that may mean that you skip a few waypoints out of your flight plan. That's perfectly normal, okay? And usually, if there's no other control on, tower will just hand you off to Unicom, just say go to Unicom, and on Unicom you basically do not a lot. It's where there's no control, it's just a text frequency, okay? And you can just sit there and just fly along, but you do need to announce your intentions, okay? So if you're taking off or landing into an airport with no control and you are on Unicom, you need to type in that box that I showed you what you are doing. So let's say I was landing on Unicom, I would put in the box November 80992 is, I don't know, 20 miles to the east of the field, coming in, full stop landing runway 9. That's just a completely made up thing, but that's the sort of thing you might put if you were coming into an airport with no control on Unicom, okay? If there is control towards your destination airport or along the way with center controllers or whatever, they will usually send you a contact me, and you will hear a beeping sound and it will appear in a new tab, okay? This is how you know it's a contact me. So where you've got that messages tab, there you go. If you get a contact me, a new tab will appear there, so you know to go and check on VATSIM what's their frequency, and then go and contact them, okay? That's how that will work for you. So you'll know that they've contacted you. It might take you a while to get used to all the different sounds, but you'll learn them in the end, so you'll know, oh yeah, that's a contact me, that controller's messaging me to say contact me please. You check his frequency and contact him. So you'll pretty much be, let's say there is control along the way of the flight, we would be in contact with like centers if they were on the network, if they were controlling. They probably wouldn't tell us to do much as soon as we were up at our cruise altitude. They would just pretty much leave us alone. Just make sure you're listening out on the frequency. As you get closer to your destination airport, if there is an approach controller, they will speak to you and vector you a bit, and if there's a tower, they will also do the same as you get closer. So approach will probably contact you a little bit further out, and then as you get a lot closer to actually coming into land, you would contact tower. If there's no approach, you would just contact tower as soon as you're closer to the airport. So if there's no approach, controller on, it's up to you to initiate descent. It's up to you to get the aircraft in a position where you can actually land, and then wait for tower to contact you, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 miles away from the airport, whatever, and then you can just speak to tower and let them know that you are ready to land, and say okay, we're coming in, and they will hopefully give you clearance. Okay, one piece of terminology that may be helpful to speak to approach and tower controllers is self-position. So I've mentioned this before, FSX Pilot, when it's doing a landing, is not very good with being given vectors. So you cannot be vectored around by a controller or climbed or descended once you have initiated the approach with FSX Pilot. So the best thing to say to a controller is, okay, I'm using an add-on to fly the aircraft called FSX Pilot as I am blind. I'm going to need to self-position the aircraft for an approach, and that just means you're going to be positioning the aircraft, or FSX Pilot is. You're in control of that, not the controller. The controller will not vector you for an approach, it will just be your job. Okay, then the controller will leave you alone, hopefully let FSX Pilot do all the flying, and you can just speak to them as and when is necessary. It all depends on what type of landing you're doing. So if you're doing an ILS, you'd have to let them know when you've captured the glide slope or localizer, for example. If you were doing a traffic pattern, you'd have to report like base. The controller may say, okay, November 80992 cleared for the self-positioned approach, and report base. So then if I was flying a traffic pattern landing in a Cessna, I could say November 80992, okay, we're now on base for the approach runway, whatever. So that's how that would work. Once you've touched down at the airport, like I said, if you're on Unicom, you don't need to really say anything. You can just say on Unicom, November 80992 vacated runway, whatever. You can just type that in and send that, so all the pilots know you've vacated the runway. If you are talking to a controller, if there's a tower on, for example, you could just say, well, thanks for your service, November 80992, we're logging off now, once you've touched down and vacated the runway. Okay.
Epson dialog. OK button.
Oh, go away.
Range, tab control.
Go away, Epson. Yes. So, unfortunately, of course, FSX Pilot cannot taxi to a gate, but you could just spawn into a gate. So if the tower or the ground controller that's on tries to give you a taxi to a gate once you've touched down, just say negative, we can't accept taxis, but we will be spawning to gate or stand, whatever. And once you're there, you can just disconnect from the network. So I think I've covered everything there. It's a complicated process. Just remember the fundamental parts of the client. You've got your two edit boxes, one where you can read messages on frequency, the other box where you can type on frequency. Okay, it's also there where you can put in important information like .com1, .x for your squawk code, and you can also do .msg to message your controller. You've also got your tab, your
controller, edit, messages tab,
messages tab there, which is still on messages, but if you had other controllers messaging you or you'd message them, then you would get a new tab there. You've got your VAT spy grid, of course, where you can see all the controllers that are online, all the positions, you can see their frequencies, so you can come in here and type it in. I think that's pretty much it. The only thing left to say is with FSX, because it's not as an advanced simulator, you have to tab into the VPilot window to actually speak to the controller with your push to talk key. Okay, so mine is delete, so obviously I can't be in any of these edit fields. I would just have to be in the main window where you've got all the buttons that say disconnect and all that, and then I could press the delete key. If I press it now, I get that buzz because I'm currently on Unicom, which, as I said, is a non-voice capable frequency. So that's how you do that. You just press your push to talk, but like I say, you cannot be in FSX the simulator. You have to be in the VPilot window, whereas with P3D apparently you can be inside the P3D flight simulator window and you can still press your push to talk key and speak to the controller. Okay, that is another advantage of P3D with vatsim. You can just press wherever you are the push to talk key in the flight simulator window and it will still work. With FSX you have to tab into your VPilot client window and do it there. That's pretty much it. I will attempt to answer any comments. Of course, blindflightsimmer44@gmail.com if you would like to send me an email, at bflightsimmer on Twitter. All of that will work. I hope I've covered everything, and hopefully there will be a live flight video coming up in the future where I can demonstrate to you how to actually speak to controllers. But there's a lot of other videos of people on VATSIM that you can use to help you with that.
Pro list exclude. Stop recording.